Vince McMahon had one rule: no wrestler dates his daughter. But a lot of them broke it. From Midian.
Do you know I was the very first wrestler to ever ask her out on a date? Did you know that?
To Test.
Steph, will you give me the honor of being my wife?
Yes, I will. Yes.
Oh, man.
Kurt Angle, and of course Triple H. In this video, we're looking at the wrestlers Vince McMahon has exposed for dating his daughter. Let's start with Midian. Before Triple H, before any of the names you're about to hear, before any of the chaos that would define Stephanie McMahon's love life inside the wrestling world, there was Dennis Knight. You probably know him as Midian, or maybe Phineas I. Godwin if you go back far enough. Big man, hillbilly gimmick, part of The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness during the Attitude Era. Not exactly the guy you would expect to be the pioneer of this particular story, but Dennis Knight has a claim that no other wrestler on this entire list can make. He was the very first wrestler to ever ask Stephanie McMahon out on a date. He told the story in 2024, nearly 30 years after it happened, on the False Finish podcast, and then again on The Undertaker's 6 Feet Under podcast. And the way he tells it, there was nothing dramatic about it. No grand gesture, no backstage confrontation with Vince McMahon. Just a young wrestler, a day off, and a simple question.
When did you ask Stephanie out on a date?
Do you know I was the very first wrestler to ever ask her out on a date? Did you know that? We were at a TV. I mean, we're both like 23.
Dennis Knight was at a television taping. Both of them were young. Both of them were just starting out in this world. And he figured he had nothing to lose.
I was like, do you want to, just casually go see a movie or something like that? And she was like, oh, I'd love to.
And for one brief moment, it seemed like it might actually work. But then came the answer that would define the next several years of Stephanie McMahon's life, with wrestlers constantly trying to get close to her.
But my dad doesn't let me date wrestlers.
Triple H had to kidnap her.
And that last line got a laugh, because of course it did. But underneath the joke is something that tells you everything you need to know about the environment Stephanie McMahon was growing up in. Vince McMahon had a strict, no exceptions rule. His daughter was not dating anyone from his locker room. Full stop. Dennis Knight took it on the chin. No scene, no drama. He walked away with a polite rejection and apparently zero bitterness. When he spoke about it in 2024, decades removed from that television taping, the warmth in his voice was genuine. He told the False Finish podcast that he was in love with her, his words, and that when he eventually saw her at the Hall of Fame, he just gave her a giant hug. He called her and Triple H a fantastic couple. He said he loves them both. That is about as clean an ending as this kind of story ever gets. However, while Midian asked politely and accepted the answer graciously, the next man on this list didn't exactly take the conventional route either. Test Andrew Martin, known to wrestling fans everywhere as Test, arrived in the World Wrestling Federation in 1998 looking like everything a wrestling company could want. 6 feet 6 inches, chiseled, athletic, a big man who could actually move. He had the look. He had the presence. And by 1999, he had something else entirely. An on-screen romance with Stephanie McMahon that turned into one of the most talked about angles of the entire Attitude Era. It started simply enough. Test began appearing alongside Stephanie on television, and the story the writers were telling was straightforward. Wrestler falls for the boss's daughter. Boss and brother disapprove. Wrestler fights to prove himself worthy. Classic stuff, but the crowd bought it completely, because the two of them had genuine chemistry on screen, and the writing gave the angle real emotional stakes. The moment that defined the whole storyline came at SummerSlam, where Test faced Shane McMahon in a Greenwich street fight. A love her or leave her match, with Stephanie's future on the line. Test won, and then not long after came the moment that nobody in that arena was ready for.
There's something I have to ask you. Will you marry me?
The place erupted, and on screen, Stephanie McMahon didn't say yes immediately. She told him she needed time. 3 days later, on the debut episode of WWE SmackDown, she called Andrew Martin to the ring.
And I said I needed some time, but only because I wanted everything to be right. Now we're alone in the ring, and I have an answer for you.
And then she said yes. The crowd went absolutely wild as Stephanie McMahon accepted Andrew Martin's proposal, creating one of the biggest moments of the Attitude Era.
Steph, will you give me the honor of being my wife?
Shane McMahon and his crew showed up to ruin it, because of course they did. But Andrew Martin fought them off, and the visual of him carrying his fiancée to safety felt like the ending of a movie. For one brief, shining moment, Andrew Martin was the ultimate babyface hero of the World Wrestling Federation. But if Tess' story is the one that played out the loudest on television, the next name on this list is the one that has been whispered about for more than 20 years. Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle walked into the WWF in 1999 with something no other wrestler on this list had: an Olympic gold medal. A legitimate athletic credential so enormous that the company built his entire character around it. The arrogant, by-the-book, intensely competitive Olympic hero who believed he was better than everyone in the room, and was usually right. He was also, by most accounts, completely unprepared for what happened when Stephanie McMahon started paying attention to him on television. The angle began on the April 20th, 2000 episode of WWE SmackDown, and it started innocently enough: a conversation, some flattery, and an invitation.
You know, your most admirable quality is your credibility. And you're the only Olympic gold medalist in the World Wrestling Federation.
Stephanie McMahon was appealing to his ego, and Kurt Angle, playing the character perfectly, took the bait completely.
It's true. And I was just wondering if you could bring some credibility to tonight's lumberjack match. So I'm inviting you to be a lumberjack.
What followed over the next several months was one of the most entertaining on-screen love triangles in Attitude Era history. Stephanie McMahon flirted. Kurt Angle responded. And Triple H, who was dating Stephanie in real life at the time, watched all of it unfold, both on camera and behind the scenes. The tension between all three of them created some genuinely electric television. The angle escalated slowly. Stephanie showed up at ringside for Angle. They shared lingering looks. Angle positioned himself as a romantic alternative to Triple H. And then came the moment that became one of the most talked about scenes of the entire year: an on-screen kiss on the August 14th, 2000 episode of WWE Raw, with Stephanie knocked out in the ring and Angle leaning in. The scene was reportedly directed personally by Vince McMahon himself. And by Angle's own account, it was one of the most uncomfortable moments of his career. Not because of anything scandalous, but because he was fully aware that the woman he was kissing on television was genuinely in a relationship with his coworker, a coworker who, incidentally, could probably bench press a small vehicle. Angle later described the kiss as a nervous, awkward fish lips moment, his words, and said Stephanie joked afterward that he kissed like a fish. He also recalled Vince personally directing the scene, which made the entire experience feel even more surreal. But behind the laughs, the storyline had real stakes. There were reportedly plans to take the angle even further, to actually have Stephanie choose Angle over Triple H on screen. Those plans were eventually dropped, partly because Triple H felt fans wouldn't buy it, and partly because the real-life relationship made the whole thing increasingly complicated to navigate. The angle came to an end at Unforgiven, when Stephanie betrayed Angle in the ring and reaffirmed her loyalty to Triple H. Angle walked away with the World Wrestling Federation Championship soon afterward, which was its own kind of consolation prize, and the love triangle was quietly retired. There was never any real-life romantic element to any of it. Angle has said so directly. Triple H has said so as well. And Stephanie's real-life path made that reality perfectly clear. But for a few months in the year 2000, Kurt Angle was the most convincing, almost rival for Stephanie McMahon's affection that World Wrestling Entertainment ever produced. And years later, when Angle returned to WWE as Raw general manager and the two crossed paths again professionally, there was one last reminder of just how good that old storyline really was.
Not only do we have a business relationship, but we both know we have a personal relationship as well. Steph, I know you're the thing for me. And I'll be honest with you, I have a thing for you too.
But Stephanie McMahon, as she always did, shut it down with authority. And that was that.
You know what, Kurt?
Yeah.
I do have a thing for you. There's a time and a place for everything. And right now, it's time for business.
Kurt Angle, Olympic gold medalist, 13-time world champion, and one of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived, left that office without a date. Some men, though, didn't even need a storyline to make their feelings known. The next person on this list never had an angle with Stephanie McMahon at all. He just found a microphone, told the truth, and let the world figure out what to do with it. Devon Dudley. Devon Dudley spent the better part of his WWE career putting people through tables, winning tag team gold, and helping build one of the most iconic acts in wrestling history alongside Bubba Ray Dudley. The Dudley boys weren't just successful, they were legendary. And Devon's role in that team, the fire, the preaching, the perfectly timed Devon, get the tables, made him one of the most recognizable faces of both the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era. What he didn't spend much of his career doing was making headlines over Stephanie McMahon. That changed in January 2021, when a podcast appearance turned into a confession that wrestling media ran with for days. Laughing, clearly in a lighthearted mood, Devon admitted something that had apparently been sitting with him for years. He admired Stephanie. He called her beautiful, charismatic, and someone he deeply respected. He was joking mostly. The tone was playful, nostalgic, the kind of locker room honesty that tends to come out when the cameras feel casual and the questions are soft. But once headlines got involved, context disappeared, and a harmless moment started looking like something far more serious than it actually was. Years later, Devon made his feelings crystal clear. This was never about scandal. It was admiration, respect, and gratitude. Especially after Stephanie reached out personally during one of the hardest moments of his life, checking on him after his health scare and reminding him that people in that company still cared. When you look at the full picture, Devon Dudley's story with Stephanie McMahon isn't controversial at all. It's actually one of the warmest stories on this entire list, but the next man wasn't quite as subtle. Mr. Kennedy. Anyone watching WWE SmackDown in the mid-2000s, Mr. Kennedy always felt like he was one breakout moment away from the top. The self-announcing gimmick, the microphone dropping from the rafters, the arrogance, the presence. It all worked. He won Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 23. He looked destined for the main event. And then came the injuries, the suspensions, and eventually his release in 2009. That after leaving WWE, Kennedy did what a lot of wrestlers do when they no longer have to worry about corporate consequences. He started talking honestly. And when the subject of Stephanie McMahon came up, he didn't hesitate. He simply said she was gorgeous. That even before he got to WWE, just watching television, he noticed her. And when he finally met her in person, that impression only got stronger. No scandal, no backstage drama, no secret relationship, just a wrestler, a camera, and an honest answer. But then we get to the one story that overshadows all the others. The one that actually became real, Triple H. Everything that came before this entry, every polite rejection, every on-screen romance, every podcast confession, every whispered rumor, exists in the shadow of what Paul Levesque pulled off. Because Triple H didn't just have feelings for Stephanie McMahon. He married her, and the story of how he got there remains one of the strangest, most layered love stories professional wrestling has ever produced. It started, as so many WWE stories do, as pure fiction. November 1999. Test and Stephanie's wedding ceremony. Triple H, playing the calculating, manipulative heel he had perfected, interrupts the entire event and reveals that he had secretly married Stephanie in Las Vegas. It was a storyline designed to launch the McMahon-Helmsley era, give Triple H a power base, and transform Stephanie into a full-blown villain. Nobody in that arena thought it was the beginning of a real love story. But somewhere between the scripted marriage and the real one, somewhere between the late nights on the road, the chemistry on camera, the growing trust behind the scenes, and the moments that weren't written into any script, something changed. And for the first time on this list, Vince McMahon's rule didn't just get broken. It got rewritten.
And then how does he put the moves on the boss's daughter? Does he begin to say, listen, I'm having feelings for you? Or
He
does
was
he
very
just...
flirtatious.
The on-screen dynamic made it easy to blur the lines. They were playing a couple on television multiple nights a week, but Stephanie McMahon was clear that it went far beyond the performance.
And one time when I was standing around the ring, he sort of crawled around me. He was, on the floor, and he felt my leg. And I was like, that's definitely flirtation.
There was a problem, though. Company policy. The same policy that had stopped Dennis Knight cold years earlier strictly forbade relationships between on-air talent. And this wasn't just any company rule. This was Vince McMahon's rule about his daughter. And the man trying to break it was one of Vince's biggest stars. They kept it quiet for a while. Vince found out. At first, he approved it. Then he pulled back. The relationship cooled off for nearly 10 months before Triple H and Stephanie McMahon found their way back to each other. Eventually, Vince gave his blessing. And Triple H has said Stephanie later described him risking everything to be with her as one of the most romantic things anyone had ever done for her. Think about what that actually means. Triple H, at the absolute peak of his wrestling power, holding multiple world championships, leading one of the most dominant heel factions in company history, was willing to put all of it on the line for a relationship that Vince McMahon could have ended with a single phone call. He proposed on Valentine's Day, 2003. They were married on October 25, 2003, in St. Teresa of Avila Church, surrounded by family, friends, and the people who had watched their story unfold from ringside. Together, they built a life, 3 daughters, a family, and eventually, the future leadership of World Wrestling Entertainment itself. When Triple H suffered a serious cardiac event in 2021, it was Stephanie who pushed him to get medical help. The man who spent his career being the toughest person in every room suddenly found himself being taken care of by the woman he had risked everything to be with. He officially retired from in-ring competition in 2022. The championships were behind him. The matches were over. But the real story, the one nobody scripted, the one nobody wrote, the one that started as fiction and somehow became real, was still going. Out of all the wrestlers who ever looked at Stephanie McMahon and felt something, only one of them ended up building a life with her. And he did it the same way he did everything else, by outlasting every obstacle in his path and being exactly who she needed when it mattered most. But wrestling has always thrived on rumors. And the next name on this list might be the most controversial of them all. Randy Savage. There are wrestling rumors, and then there are wrestling rumors that take on a life of their own. The kind that spread through locker rooms, message boards, podcasts, and fan circles until people start repeating them like documented fact. The story connecting Randy Savage to Stephanie McMahon is exactly that kind of rumor. Here's what is actually known. Savage left the World Wrestling Federation in 1994 when his contract expired. Unlike so many other stars from that era, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, even Shawn Michaels, Savage never returned during his lifetime. Not for a cameo. Not for a reunion. Not even for the Hall of Fame. He moved on. World Championship Wrestling. Pop culture. Commercials. Movies. Music. But the door to WWE stayed closed, and because nobody ever got a clean explanation, people created their OW and TO this day. There has never been verified evidence of any romantic relationship between Randy Savage and Stephanie McMahon. No confirmed interviews. No documented proof. No statements from anyone directly involved. Just a rumor that fit a mystery, and because it fit, it survived. And then this list takes one final turn. Brie Bella. Not every admission on this list came from the men's locker room. And not every confession came wrapped in rumors or backstage drama. Sometimes it was just respect, spoken out loud in the middle of a feud. In 2014, Brie Bella was locked in one of the biggest storylines of her career with Stephanie McMahon. The promos were sharp. The crowd was invested. The emotions felt real. And during an interview that year, Brie said something that caught a lot of people off guard. She admitted she had a girl crush on Stephanie. Not because of scandal. Not because of gossip. But because of admiration. She praised Stephanie's intelligence, her charisma, her work ethic, her ability to represent WWE publicly, lead behind the scenes, and then step into the ring and completely own the moment. And honestly, that may be the most revealing story on this entire list, because after all the rumors, all the storylines, all the whispered confessions, all the relationships, and all the headlines, maybe the truest thing anyone ever said about Stephanie McMahon wasn't about romance at all. It was about respect. Love this video? Click on the next card and keep watching.